Hello and welcome back to OC Aviary. This video today is all on crossbills, so everything you need to know about crossbills will be in this video. So we're going to talk about the sort of design of the enclosures and the flight, how you're going to set out the flights for a crossbill, specific needs of the crossbills as well, as they are slightly different to the rest of the other finches. We're also then going to look at the mutations there is of crossbill, as well as the hybrids and the mules. And then there are a few other things, so the diet, for example, and then just medication treatment, supplements and different things like that. So I'm going to take you through now, and we're going to take a look first at the actual sort of enclosure design, if you will. So this is the crossbills flight right now. So this is actually 8 feet front to back, 4 feet wide, 6 feet tall. And I've got a lot of cover in here, in fairness, compared to how I usually have my flights. I like to make sure that my flights are open, so we don't have loads of cover for the birds, because I do like to make sure that the birds are used to people and not always hiding, because that's the worst thing you want. If the birds are hiding, they aren't used to you, and then you try and take them to shows and they just aren't happy in a show cage. So the way I set out this flight is we've got loads of pine in here. So this is all like sort of a pine branches here. Still got the leaves on. This is fresh. I got this from a pine forest a few days ago. We also have this, so this is sort of a different variety of pine, but once again an evergreen plant. So crossbills, I would always suggest is that whenever you set up a crossbill enclosure, use evergreen plants, because one, they last longer, but also it is naturally where a crossbill would reside in the wild. So crossbills do tend to like the pine, as well as conifers and things like that, mainly where they can get their sort of main food sources, which is actually sort of pine cones and the different sort of nuts which is produced by those sorts of trees, where they get insects as well as lots of different small seeds. So something to point out here is that I've got a rather large branch here, which it had more pine cones on 3 days ago, but with the crossbills being in here, there's not as many left as there was a few days ago. But either way, that I got the other day, just again from the pine forest, loads of fresh pine cones. The crossbills have stripped it of all of the sort of leaves and vegetation growing on there. But we have all of the different pine cones here. So these are all sort of smaller pine cones. Much smaller varieties, which I find that they're better with just leaving on the perch, because they can chew it more than one, they can hang on to them and they can pull them off and different things like that. But also what I do like to give them is, as well as the smaller ones, we also give them the larger ones. So this is an example of a larger one. Now that is actually off of sort of a conifer sort of tree, and I got that from Clumber Park actually, in sort of I believe Nottinghamshire. Anyway, and we just I got loads of these off the trees, and there's loads on the floor, and I find that the crossbills do enjoy to chew these, as you can see. Chew that up there, and I do have a few. These are all fresh, so they aren't as chewed up. But I had some that were in for a week, and you can't really tell any shapes left on it. They've chewed it back that far. They've extracted any of the seeds in there and any of the grubs and insects and things like that. And so I've got all that. Now, as it goes for perch placement, crossbills are a really active bird, so it's important that whatever you do, you make sure that you keep them fit and keep them active, because ultimately they'll get bored, and which I think can really does have a detrimental effect on the birds. So right now I have perches which are spaced about, I want to say, 4 or 5 feet apart. So we have this first one here, which is at the very front of the flight, so I can actually watch the birds. But then we also have this sort of larger branch across, so that's just so the birds can go to and from, keeping them fit in that sense. But then there's also all of the pine at the back, so they love to go through that, chew at the wood, chew at all of the different pine cones that are on there, such as this one, chew at the leaves, and really just fly about there and keep active with the beaks and climbing about and stuff. But then we also have these. So these again, these are more just for I guess sort of the acrobatic side of it. As crossbills, you know, I've seen mine very often hanging from the roof, just by the feet, hanging about, and they're pulling themselves around with the beak because they're ever so strong. And that's just mainly one of those things, again, where they'll come on it, they'll chew it, they'll play about with it and leave it. So very important thing to mention is that you must keep your crossbills active if you're going to have success when breeding them, but also when keeping them. Other bits just to mention that are in this flight, so as you can see there's a young cockbird. I got him about a month ago now. You may recognise him from a video a few weeks ago, and he was bred by a local chap. I've dealt with this chap quite a few times before. No complaints. Absolutely fantastic bird that Crossbill is, and yeah, his line is actually from the island. From Ireland, that line. So it's it's a good line to get in and just really to work with. Now I do believe that line was originally established by Mark Poynting. So obviously fantastic birds, Mark, and we'll have to get some crossbills from you in the future. But yeah, just other things in the flight. So we've got some sort of larger branches. Now this is from a hardwood tree I chopped down a few years ago, and I just kept them to the side because I thought I know I'll use them in a flight at some point, and I have used them in several different setups. As I used one of them in the for the bullfinches this year. And really that's just to make it a bit more natural, but also something which the crossbills can chew on, strip the bark from, and everything like that. Something else to mention as well when actually having a flight designed for crossbills is that you must make sure that you give them plenty of things to chew, because like you can see here, this is wooden, the shed is wooden, that's PVC, or like perspex almost, so they will chew that if they don't have anything to chew and keep them active. But I make sure that, especially in here, there's plenty to do, so they have loads of pine to chew there, loads of pine cones. There's larger pine cones on the floor which they have more, they're more than capable of picking up pine cones this size in the beak and flying up to a perch. I find quite often they can chew on this branch no problem as well. There's all this to chew on, and just really I want to give them as much as possible that's replaceable, that they can chew, just branches and sticks and things like that, so that I don't have to replace bits of the flight, because that's obviously not what we want. So that really is just an overall of the Crossbill's flight. It's a clear perspex roof. Now I will be sorting that soon, where I'll be getting some wood up the top here so that they have plenty of cover. And there you are, you can actually see Crossbill there. Also, a bit of something to quickly mention actually when it comes to entertaining the crossbills and chewing. So as you can see, that they are really active birds, just like that, just climbing. They love to do that, but also they have very good grip with their feet and also the beak. Now, something I actually learnt from the Crossbills group on Facebook, Paul Meek put up a few weeks ago, I believe, that actually, if you go to somewhere as simple as a petrol station, a garage, and you can buy a big sack of logs for a few pounds, and they just just chop wood. If you get that and you drill a hook or a screw into the top, hang that from the roof, or even just connect it onto your to the side of your flight and just hang it on there. The crossbills absolutely love to chew at that actual almost whole log, that section of log that's been cut and actually used for firewood. So they strip the bark off of that and also strip all the individual fibres. So that is something just to bear in mind, that if you would rather give the birds a log actually just to strip, then by all means do. It's just be aware that there might be a few implications with that you might have areas of your flight chewed. But it works for Paul, and I will actually try that soon. But I would also like to keep it like this, just for the safety of my flights, but also I think ultimately the comfort of the birds as well. So a question I've been asked quite regularly is what I do about the actual floor in the flights. So a lot of people suggest just having straight down onto concrete, as it's very easy to jet wash, very easy to clean, and also vermin proof. Now this is what I've done, partially because I already had this there, but also because I think it actually works quite nicely. is having a sort of a decking board to start with, just because that allows water to drain through. So whenever there's any moisture get on here, it goes straight through underneath the decking. Then we have to just see there's a tile there, so paving slabs just there, and I've paving slab the whole thing with, you know, not fixing them down or concreting them or cementing them in or anything like that, just to keep that vermin proof so the vermin don't come up through. And then on top of that, I have an AstroTurf. The AstroTurf, you know, it gives it a bit more of a natural look, just green for the birds, but also it's great because all I have to do is roll that up, take it outside into the garden, give it a shake, a jet wash, and maybe a scrub down with some bleach, and it looks good as new. And I do that usually after every season, so this will stay down until the breeding season. I'll take it out, jet wash it, clean it, and then put it down back there. Other things I put on the floor in the flights are a bathing dish, so a dish for the birds to bath in, a feed dish, but also a dish of diatomaceous earth to keep the mites away. Other bits just for the Crossbills select flight are pine cones for them to chew at, as well as sticks, and also, as you notice over there, a stone, a few more stones, and a few there, just so that they can keep their beak worn down, so we don't have any overgrown beaks. Something that I also thought would be worth showing you is actually just how I have the front of my flights in winter. Now obviously the temperature has dropped and it is about 7 degrees right now. Highs in the day are probably anywhere up to about 13-14 degrees at most, and it is currently October, so it does get quite cold in the night, with it being as low as 4. So actually what I've done is I've wrapped the whole front of this flight, because I've got birds in there, with a sort of a see-through, I guess you could say they're actually bags, but you could do it with anything so simple as a tarpaulin, or some people even do perspex. Now as you can see, this area is open. The reason I have this is just so that the birds get the fresh air moving in and out, but also just for their benefit, so that they actually can watch and things like that. Something I've also done with that is just got a peg, and that just gets it very easy, so I can undo those pegs, the flap comes down, and then we just get that peg over there and over that, like that, and then that is the whole front of the flight wrapped and no draft. So I found that that just works nicely, just to keep the birds warm and draft free in the winter. So now we're going to talk about the diet of the Crossbills. So I make up my own mix, and that is made from several different mixes, to be fair. So in here it is parakeet seed, so I buy sort of a parakeet mix and I mix that in. Then we have just like a standard sort of British seed mix, so I give that to a lot of the smaller finches in here, and I also mix that in for the Crossbills, as they do like to eat and pick at those little seeds. Linseed, so I do make sure that I give them the linseed just for that sort of oily coat on the outside of their feathers. I just find that that's really good, for especially because I keep them outside all year. It just adds a bit of an extra layer of protection onto them, so they can withstand slightly colder temperatures. It just really helps them, as well as making them look a better bird, especially when they're in the show cage with like a glossy finish on the feathers. Then we have the Niger seed. So Niger seed is a very fine seed, and that is something that I give to mainly the siskins and the goldfinches, as well as the red poles, because they tend to like that seed a lot more than a lot of the other finches, mainly because they're just small little seeds for them to pick at, and I actually give that to the Crossbills because I know that the Crossbills like to pick at those small little seeds, as naturally they will be fetching those sort of seeds out of pine cones and nuts and things like that, which they crack open. So as we looked at earlier, the pine cones and the nuts from conifers and things like that, the Crossbills break open, which is what their beak's designed to do, to extract the insects and the little seeds. So the idea of Niger seed is that that sort of replicates what they would be getting out of those seeds. Then we have the sort of conditioning mix. So I give them a conditioning mix, which I use for the smaller finches mainly, which is a very fine mix of seeds. So there's a lot of sort of grass seeds, Niger seed in there, more. I believe there's a little bit of linseed. I do have some here actually. A little bit of hemp in there and perhaps a little bit of millet. So that is actually a conditioning seed that I give to everything, but I mix that in for the crossbills as well. And that really it's just good to give them. It's going to help getting them in condition, but again, it's once again those smaller seeds the birds usually would naturally fetch out of pine cones and different things that they break open in the wild. So that's why I give them a conditioning mix as well, not only to keep them in condition, but for that fact. And then finally, I give them some germination seed. Now, germination seed, I don't germinate it for them when I have it in this mix. The idea of having that is so that there's some slightly different seeds which they wouldn't, you wouldn't usually get in a standard mix for them to pick out, but also some, there's a completely different sort of style of seed, if you understand what I mean there. So a lot of seeds are generally sort of, that shape. So that's sunflower seeds. So I give them the sunflower seeds as they love to crack them open, and they love the sunflower hearts. But it's the germination seed actually just gives them a few different other types of seed. So I'll show you one here. Now I can't remember the exact names, but again, a different seed there. And that's just something different for them to pick at and to go and chew through. Now that is my own sort of mix, and the ratios are all here, so I'll put it on the screen for you. And a lot of people, some people like to make their own mixes. I prefer to make my own mix just because I only have 4 if not 5 crossbills at the moment anyway, so I don't see the need to go and buy a mix just specific for the crossbills. It'll take them quite a while to eat it, so I'd rather make my own mix so I know exactly what's going into it for them. But as a recommendation, as I've heard, a lot of people use I think it was Haith's greenfinch mix, so a lot of crossbill breeders use that. There are some specific crossbill mixes, but once again, it's a sort of thing where I don't want to go buying a big bag of crossbill feed just because, and I've got 5 crossbills, so it really isn't worth it to me as much as if I had 20 crossbills, or if I was feeding them on a greenfinch mix. I do have enough greenfinches, so I really should start buying a specific greenfinch mix. But ultimately, I've found that what I give them, it gets the job done. The birds are healthy, the birds are happy, the birds are breeding, and that really, if a bird's in good shape, if it's breeding, and they're having a great time, obviously, with the seed that I'm giving them. So that shouldn't really be a problem. But that is my crossbill mix. So I made that up myself. I do need to make some more up soon, so that'll probably last 2 weeks, and then I'll just make another batch very shortly for them, and I store that in a drum. So that's just it's actually a marine salt. So I have a marine fish tank, if anyone didn't know. I don't really post about it much just because it's in the developments at the moment anyway. But that's just like a resealable tub, which I put it in just to keep it dry, keep it out of the way of the vermin, so that the seeds kept nicely ready for the crossbills. So now we're going to talk about crossbill mules and crossbill hybrids. So a crossbill mule is usually, it doesn't have to be, but a crossbill hen with a canary cock, or at least what I've seen a lot of people doing. So that's usually a Norwich cock, as they tend to make the better mules, but the bigger mules. I do know a few people, so I believe someone did a red mosaic canary cock to a crossbill hen. That was a nice enough young, but just a bit of something different. I believe chap in Malta did a Jasper Canary crossbill. So nothing wrong that you can use any type of canary. It's just for at least the show standard exhibition Norwich crossbill, the crossbill mules, and you want to be using a Norwich, or at least something very similar. Maybe a red factor would be nice if you've got a big red factor, or maybe even a half a red factor and half a Norwich, or I do know that several people are developing lines where they've bred a red factor into a Norwich line and they're breeding them back to Norwich, just so you get really the colour of the red factor into the Norwich. And the main idea of that is just to give you like an ultimate muling bird, really, or at least for the sort of red descended birds. I wouldn't really go putting a siskin or a greenfinch with a red factor Norwich, just because it wouldn't be worth it. You might as well use a green Norwich, for example, or a normal Norwich or something like that, rather. than a red factor Norwich. So if using Norwich, if you're going to do Crossbill mules, ideally. If Crossbill hybrids then, so Crossbill hybrids are something that are actually getting more and more common. There's a lot of people like them. You obviously get a really good size, and it's just a bit of something different. And I found, at least with what other people have shown, I haven't bred any Crossbill Norwich, I haven't any Crossbill mules or Crossbill hybrids. I haven't bred any, but I am trying Greenfinch Crossbill next year with a Greenfinch cock who is split for Agate and split for Pied, so we might get some mutation hybrids out of that. So as it goes for Crossbill hybrids, they generally have gone with everything, as far as I'm aware, at least. I know that at least I've got common Crossbills, and they've been bred with a hell of a lot. So obviously with the Canary, but then Greenfinch common Crossbill, there's Siskin Crossbill, Red Poll Crossbill, Crossbill Bullfinch, there's Chaffinch Crossbill as well. I believe it was maybe at the World Show this year, so the 2020 World Show, or it might have been 2019 World Show. There was a Crossbill Chaffinch. Now, there's been a lot of speculation with that as to how that was bred, whether it was actually bred naturally, so we had a Crossbill cock paired to a Chaffinch hen, or whether it was an artificial insemination job where we basically got the sperm from a Crossbill cock, put it in a Chaffinch, and obviously it's there then, and if it's going to happen, then it's realistically it's going to happen if the sperm's viable. So we got a Crossbill Chaffinch as well. That was it's an interesting one, really. I'm not that fond on it personally. I think it basically looks like a Chaffinch with a really long beak. You can see a bit of Crossbill in it, but it's not a bird I'd be looking to breed, at least, especially at the moment. As it goes for just the other Crossbill hybrids then, there's like 2-barred Crossbill Cross Bullfinch. That is an amazing looking hybrid. I would love to breed one of those. So I would love to breed either a 2-barred Cross Bullfinch or a common Cross Bullfinch, ideally. Just as something to take to the shows, and I think they look amazing, those hybrids. I know that this year, I believe it was Mark Slowey, bred a Siskin Cross 2-barred Crossbill. That was a world first this year as well, so we had a good year with Siskin hybrids this year, with obviously the first Siskin Bullfinch and then the first Siskin Cross 2-barred Crossbill. I haven't seen any updates on that bird actually for at least a few months now, so I'm hopefully, and fingers crossed, that bird is still going well. It did look a nice bird, it did look like a cock bird last I saw of it, at least. So yeah, just be aware of that. So there is those sorts of hybrids you can do as well. Now you might be thinking, you put a Siskin next to a Crossbill, that's a massive difference. Well, the best thing I can tell you to do, at least, is if you want to try that hybrid as well as the Red Poll Crossbill, or maybe even a Goldfinch Crossbill, always use a Crossbill hen, because if you use a Crossbill cock to a Siskin hen or a Red Poll hen or a Goldfinch hen, that young is going to grow far too big for the egg, and ultimately it's going to break that egg and it's die in the shell before it can even hatch. So you're always better to do the smaller cock bird with the larger hen, because there's more room for it to grow, and the chick doesn't have to take up the whole egg, but ultimately it's just more of a safer option. So use a Siskin cock, a Goldfinch cock, or a Red Poll cock to a Crossbill hen instead of vice versa. So that is really it for the Crossbill hybrids and mules, at least. But ultimately they are a good challenge, and something that I'm going to be trying next year with the Greenfinch Crossbill, and hopefully we might get some other bits in as well. So now on to Crossbill mutations. So Crossbill mutations aren't really an established thing at the moment. So the main varieties of Crossbill, at least, I'd say there's the 2 main varieties. That is the common Crossbill and the parrot Crossbill. The way you tell the difference is that there's a remarkable difference in size. So the common Crossbill is far smaller than the parrot Crossbill. but also just the beak. So a common crossbill tends to have a more of a longer beak that is slightly thinner as it butts to the face of the bird, whereas the parrot crossbill tends to have a really big beak that is on the face of the bird, so it's really sort of wide but not as long. It's more shorter, and that's the main way to tell the difference, at least, other than the size. There's also the two-barred crossbills, so there's something that I'll be looking to get in the future, maybe next year. We try and bring in a pair of two-barred crossbills, which would be nice, so we'll have to see how that goes. But then there's also the Scottish crossbill. Now, Scottish crossbills are hard to come by, for one, but also to actually get pure Scottish crossbills, I believe I saw a statistic not too long ago that it was something like 80% of the Scottish crossbills in captivity are polluted by common crossbill blood, because obviously what you don't want to, what would happen generally with that is if you breed maybe common crossbills and Scottish crossbills, and you've bred, I don't know, 3 hens and 2 cocks of the Scottish, and you can't source yourself another Scottish cock to pair with one of the hens, or what, then they're going to be saying, well, rather than wasting that bird, I would rather pair it to a common crossbill and at least get some young out of it. But the issue then is that you sell that bird on, that's a half chat, that's a fertile hybrid, and then that goes on to breed with either other Scottish crossbills, just polluting the blood, or you put it with the commons and again it just pollutes the blood. So I would advise against doing any sort of crossbill, crossbill differences with the different species of crossbill. Then there's also the Himalayan crossbill. Now this is something that I haven't seen in person. I've seen all the other crossbills in person, the commons, the parrots, the Scottish, and the two-bards, but I haven't seen a Himalayan crossbill. Now, as far as I'm aware, with crossbill mutations, there has been several different mutations in the Himalayans, and I'm not exactly sure. I can't be 100% on what they are, but I do remember seeing on Facebook I believe it was an agate crossbill, an agate Himalayan crossbill, which was a nice bird. And I believe that there's cinnamon, but again, none of these have been established, these mutations, so it really isn't something that's readily available. I do know some people have got pied crossbills, so I know this Paul O'Kane in Ireland, he has got, he bred a visual pied common crossbill cock, who's actually related to the colour-fed cock we have outside. I believe that might be, there's a potential it could be a, a nephew, I believe, maybe a nephew of that. But either way, it's not the same generation, I can promise that now, but it is related to it, and I know that line did originally come from Mark Slowey. Not Mark Slowey, apologies, Mark Pointing, but Mark Slowey does have some at least pied carrier crossbills as well, as I believe. But the pied crossbill is coming in, but it's not fully established as of yet. But it will be nice to see how they develop. Obviously, if we can get pied carrier crossbills, or if we don't get pied carrier crossbills, we actually get visual pieds, that'd be great. But I'd say it'll probably be at least 5 years before we start to see them either one come into the shows, or at least maybe walking around Stafford and you see a pair of pied crossbills for sale. It's not going to happen for at least in the the foreseeable future at the moment. At least I'd say it's going to be at least 5 years, because we want to establish those lines firmly, so we have a firm line of pied crossbills before we just go distributing them. Because obviously if you go distributing them and then you lose your stock, ultimately you might end up losing those pied crossbills, and that's the last thing you want. So that is really it for them. I believe it's definitely in the common crossbill you get the mutations occasionally. I don't recall seeing any with the parrot crossbills. As I did mention, agate Himalayan as well, so that was a bit of something different. But obviously not something that's just commonly available. So at the moment it's just normal crossbills. Now you might be wondering as well, how come I've seen yellow common crossbills and red common crossbills? So I've got yellow and reds. There's no difference in mutation, they're all normals. However, Crossbills, at least in captivity, you get the yellows because you don't colour feed. So I haven't colour fed any of my adult crossbills this year. I've only had the young colour fed. So I've got a colour fed young hen who I bred this year, and then we've got a colour fed cock who I bought in the flight, who obviously is this year's as well. So it is just on colour feeding with that. Naturally in the wild they are sort of red because of the food they eat, where in captivity, unless we don't supply that wild food to them, we aren't going to get that colour, or unless we colour feed them. I don't really have a preference when it comes to colour feeding crossbills. I think they both look nice, in my opinion at least, the yellows and the reds. I do like the look of the reds, however, what I do want to make sure I do is that I definitely know who is who when it comes to it. Now obviously I have ring numbers, but if I can easily identify, okay, the young birds are red and the adult birds are yellow, or you know, vice versa, it makes it far easier just to sort out. But I think what I probably will do is, because of when, you know, crossbills generally molt from about May. I found, at least with mine, they were in the molt from May, June sort of time until. So I didn't bother colour feeding the crossbills this year, mainly just because you know, I wasn't really paying attention that they were molting at the time. I just sort of left them to it, and I just thought, you know what, we'll let them go through, because ultimately to colour feed them in the flights was more difficult, and obviously I had everything else in the breeding cages, so it didn't really suit to have to move them elsewhere. But I will do that next year. I probably will colour feed the adults, letting them go red. With the youngsters, I'll just keep yellow, or something like that. At least I need to do need to check the show standards on them, just so I know that if the requested show standard is that the young are green or yellow, then I'll keep them as that. If it requests that the young are colour fed red, then I'll do that. Whatever meets the show standards I would rather do, because if I take the birds to the show, then it will be that. And also I will be showing 2 of my crossbills. I think it's 2 at least I've got down. I will be showing 2 of them at the online show, the Natives in Norwich online show. So if you're already entered into that, please do join Natives in Norwich. The link is in the description to the page. I am an admin on there as well. If you've got any questions, just message me, whether that's my personal account or that's OC Avery on Instagram or on Facebook, or if you just have a question in the comments, or if not, there is my email in the description as well. But if you know, please do go in the competition if you can. I do know that the entry sort of deadline is October 30th, so that's, you know, there's a week left to enter the birds, and then you can send in your videos from. So crossbills also generally aren't that hard to breed, especially when you've got them in the breeding condition. So I just want to talk quickly about nest site placement. So I bred them this year. Yeah, I had 2 clutches, but sadly the first clutch was infertile. The second clutch we had 2 youngsters from. We had a young cock, a young hen. Sadly we lost the young cock over the molt, but we have the young hen who is actually paired with the greenfinch. Now the nests I use are these. So these are cocoa fibre nests, and you know, they don't have to be awfully deep, but the idea of this is that it's sort of a natural bed for what the crossbills would actually nest on. So in the wild, a crossbill would nest in a pine tree generally, and it's just very similar to the sort of pine needles and stuff. So how I found that was best to present the nest was actually taking a external nest pan, sort of like this, and it was, yeah, I cover it with fake Christmas trees, you can see here. Taking that nest, which was like that, they have the 2 clips on the side here, clipping that on to the side there, and then zip tying. So I actually presented the nest just like that. What I would do is that would fix onto the side of the flight like that, and the crossbills, you know, absolutely love that. Yeah, the hen would go in there, and the nest material she would use was cocoa fibre as well as jute, and also lined a little bit of bark in the nest as well, which she'd stripped off of the vegetation and the logs and the wood I'd given them to chew. But it was mainly a nest built of cocoa fibre with a little bit of what should we call it? So jute and other soft materials as well. Something to avoid is cotton, as you know, one, they chew a lot, crossbills, and it gets wrapped around the beak. You don't want that. Also gets wrapped around the feet, and then you'll end up with youngsters that have lost toes. So that is exactly how I present the nests. You know, these hooks on the front I just didn't use because it was either, you know, I hooked that onto the side of the cage, something like that, onto the side of the flight, and I could either have that door open and just pin that door back like that, or I sort of just left that like that. Obviously had that zip tied, and then that actually put some Christmas tree, fake Christmas tree on that, and that just made it a nice sort of secluded place for the birds to nest. From there I covered that with Christmas tree, so as that was presented on the side of the flight, there was Christmas tree all around that, and but that was real. You know, you can use conifers, you can use pine branches and things like that, just something that gives the birds cover around the actual nest site, and that worked fantastically for me. You know, obviously being aware that they are crossbills, you're going to have to throw this away at least after the breeding season, because they chew it to bits. That, you know, after the breeding season, this whole rim was gone. You know, the adults had chewed it, if not the young, and the nest is just a mess really. But you know what, they're a quid, they're a pound, so I'll happily buy some more for a better breeding season. Yeah, it's just to keep them clean as well. Now crossbills as well, I'd say that once they've had their first round, see how they react. So the youngsters will jump. Sometimes I had the hen go literally after a youngster's a nest, she went straight down, rebuilt that nest, and was sitting on it, but then didn't lay for whatever reason. But then some people say as soon as the youngsters have met that there's left, take out the whole inside of the nest, throw that, let it rebuild. That's what I did after I had a clutch of infertile eggs. I removed the cockbird for a week, put him elsewhere, got him fit as well, had him on some Fertivit just to increase that fertility. Took the nest, the actual built-in nest out, put that on the floor, let the hen start to rebuild that. Chucked the cockbird in, he went and treaded her straight away, and we were there and we got the cockbird treading. So that is exactly what I do with the nest, and that's what I would recommend. There are other ways you could do it. Some people like to use a mesh basket, so also would sort of just look like that with a bit of a front on it, and people find that they nest straight in that. But I would rather use one of these, just as it's a bit of a safety precaution, rather than the chance that eggs could go through that if they didn't build the nest correctly. Now I hope you enjoyed that video. So I felt that it wasn't appropriate really to have a bird of the week this week, just because as we was looking at the crossbills, we looked an awful lot, and it was more of an overall video just on the crossbills, so I wanted to focus that, as well as no special mention really, but I've mentioned a few names throughout the video. So I hope you enjoyed that video. So if you aren't already, please do subscribe for more videos on the native finches and the canaries. If you haven't already, again, hit the like button and share the video with someone who you think would like to watch this. You know, this is a bird that I've been questioned about a lot because they aren't easy to come by, for one, and also that there's something that there's not a lot of information on actually of breeding crossbills. So I want to make sure I did this video as I'm bringing the birds to start conditioning them ready for the breeding season, which will start about the start of February. And if you haven't already, hit the notification bell, as that will notify you every time I upload, so you won't miss a video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.